So now that we have a good understanding of how to call subroutines and why we might call subroutines, we can take a look at passing arguments. We've noticed that we put an open and close parentheses after all of our subroutines. These parentheses are used to encase any arguments that pass into that subroutine. In this case, an argument is usually a variable or a string or something that you want to use within that subroutine that might change. As an example, let's look at our move data to new location subroutine right here. In this case, we need to know what the text string is that we are trying to move and where we are trying to move it to. So we might have a few inputs here. So we'll go over to our parentheses. And first is going to be our text string. Second will be our row number, and third will be our column number. So in the parentheses, we're going to create variables to store this information in. We'll say copy text as string, and this will be the text that we're actually copying. We'll say row num as integer, and this will be the row number we want to move that data to. And we'll also create col num as integer, which will be the column that we want to move that information to. Now I can use these variables that we just created, copy text, row num, and col num, anywhere within the subroutine for moving data without having to explicitly declare them. So this might look something like cells row num col num dot value equals copy text. And this should set my new location equal to my copied text value. If we jump back up to our full code here, we can go ahead and fix up this move data to new location that we're calling out to feed our new location code the correct data. So to start, we'll create a variable to pull the fruit that we are working with. So up here, we'll go ahead and dim a string and we'll just call this fruit. And then I'll go ahead and pull my first fruit value, which is in row 2, column 2. So row 2, column 2, dot value, and we'll set fruit equal to this. So now I know that I have my very first fruit value. Now, when I call my private subroutine down here for moving the data to a new location, you'll notice if we put the open and close parentheses at the end, VBA is actually going to prompt us for some of the inputs, as we can see here. And these are the same inputs that we just created in the actual subroutine. In this case, there are some custom items we built into the routine that we're asking for. First, the copied text, second, the new row number, and third, the new column number. So we will fill this out for the text being fruit. And let's say we want to copy this into column D, so we'll move down a few rows as well, just as an example. So we'll say row 5 and column 4. So now when our code hits this particular line, this call our moving subroutine line here, it's going to jump down to this actual private subroutine which we've written, and we've told the subroutine ahead of time these are the variables that we want to work with, this copy text, row number, and column number. So in this case, our copy text will be whatever is stored in our variable fruit, which we know we're pulling directly from our file. The row number will be 5, and the column number will be 4. So when we step into this subroutine and we actually look at this line of code, this really stands for cells row 5 column 4 dot value is going to be equal to whatever our fruit value is. For simplicity's sake, I'll just ignore these other subroutines since this is a pretty simple piece of code that we're working with, and I will go ahead and make this the U case for uppercase of our copy text. So we really don't need this make data uppercase subroutine anymore. It was just an example of how we might have broken this out. And I'll go ahead and put the highlight in there as well so we can take out our highlight new location, which means I can also take these out of my master code up at the top. So now I've made it uppercase. The last thing I can do is go ahead and highlight this yellow. So looking at the same cell that we just copied data into, we're going to look at the interior color of this cell. We're going to set it equal to something like RGB 255, 255, 100, which should be some kind of yellow. We talked a little bit about that in a separate video. So now we can go back up to our subroutine, our main master code, our public sub up at the top, and we could go ahead and pull our next fruit value. So now we'll replace our old fruit value with the new fruit value that's in row 3, column 2. And then again, we will call our private sub to move the data to a new location and do all of the other work. Again, we'll be looking at the fruit variable. This time we'll copy it into row 6 and we'll still be in column 4. And then we'll pull our last fruit value and again call the subroutine. Row 7, column 4 this time. So now we'll step through this so you can get an example of exactly how all of this behaves. But as a general summary, this subroutine, if we hadn't actually written it as a subroutine, we would have had to write each of these individual lines everywhere that you see this call subroutine, call subroutine, call subroutine. So we saved ourselves a little bit of coding, even just by breaking out this very simple goal into having a subroutine. But obviously for more complex pieces of code, having little subroutines that you can frequently call on to do repetitive tasks is extremely, extremely beneficial. So now we can go ahead and step into this. I will step into it by hitting F8, but you can also use the debug menu. I'll hit F8 again. We can see now I've pulled my first fruit value, which is apple. And now I'm on the call line. So if I press F8, we should see it dump down to our move data to new location private sub, which it does. And now we're looking at this specific cell that we pointed our little private sub to. We can see it has successfully copied our information into this new cell. It successfully made it uppercase. I'll hit F8 again, and we can see that cell has turned yellow. Now we're on this end sub, and when we end sub here, it's not actually going to exit our code. It's going to jump back up into our master code and keep stepping through our data. So now we're going to look at our second fruit, which is a banana, and I'll keep pressing F8 to walk through this. We're looking at our third fruit now, and that should be everything. And we can actually see I've made a mistake in my code. This third fruit came in as blank instead of as strawberry. And the issue lies right here with pointing to cell 3, which would be column C, row 3, instead of pointing to column B, row 4. So we'll fix that by making this 4, 2. And if I just hit play again while I'm clicked into my master code here, we see it'll update correctly to strawberry. So in this video, we talked about passing arguments and how to properly call out subroutines. So now we should be able to better organize and structure our code in VBA.